Hi, and welcome to the Book Revolution podcast. I am Tim.
And I am Amanda.
Are you?
I am.
Okay, well.
Ask again tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll try again tomorrow. So, this is the Book Revolution podcast. We talk about books and book type stuff.
Only book type things.
Only book type things.
That's a lie. Last time we talked about some movies.
Yeah.
And TV shows. Mediums. We talk about mediums.
Yeah, book related things.
That's true.
As long as it's related to books, we're going to talk about it.
Which means that could really be anything.
That's...
Like a purse, because a purse can hold books.
That's why it's going to be a long-running podcast. But first, we're going to talk about what we're reading. What are you currently reading, Amanda?
I am currently reading Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. It's supposed to be one of those very literary books, one of those moment in time books akin to a David Copperfield or, very just general literary fiction. It's about a child who is growing up and just has a tumultuous childhood, foster care or witnessing drug abuse or witnessing violence. And I don't know, I'm only like 70 pages in right now. I started it this morning, but it's quite good. I'm thinking about it every time I put it down, so see how long it takes me, but I'm excited for it.
Okay.
It's well written.
I am still currently reading Five Broken Blades. I am further along in the book. I know more about it. But I'm also simultaneously reading, because of an app that we'll talk about later, I found out that I'm currently reading 16 books.
Yeah, so. I remember you going through your stash of books and just finding bookmarks in them.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Now, when you went through those 16 books, how many of them do you actually remember starting?
So I only kept the books. There's more. There were more that I had bookmarks in. I only kept the books that I actually remember anything about.
I see.
So, aside from Five Broken Blades, I'm also reading Becky Lynch's autobiography. She's a professional wrestler. Her autobiography is The Man, Not Your Average Girl. And I'm halfway through that, and it's a good book. It's a good autobiography.
And that's not one that you put down for a while either. I feel like you started that fairly recently enough. Yeah. It's not like something that you realize you started without remembering you had started it.
Yeah. I was a good third into the book before my ADHD kicked in, and I just moved on to another book. Mm-hmm. So I'm continuing to read through that, and hopefully I will finish it soon. It's not a very long book, and it's not a hard read. Like, if you've ever seen or heard Becky Lynch talk, her voice is stuck in my head. She's very Irish, so it's. Do you ever get that when you see someone who have you ever read an autobiography and then saw the person talk?
No, I don't read autobiographies.
Oh, well, I get their. I
don't know that I've actually ever read an autobiography.
Really?
Well, wait, the one that I just finished.
Yeah.
I finished a book called Angela's Ashes that had been loaned to me by a friend that I had to get back to them. And that was about Frank McCourt's childhood. And so that was an autobiography, but I have no idea who Frank McCourt is. So
I see.
I have literally no idea who this person is. So I certainly have never heard them speak.
It's very interesting to have heard someone speak and then read their autobiography because you can't get their voice out of your head when you're reading.
I'm going to have to try that. I have the Michelle Obama book that I haven't read.
Okay.
The one that came out years and years ago.
Yeah.
I could try that, but I feel like that's not going to happen.
You don't think so? All
no.
Right. Before you read the book, you have to watch a Michelle Obama speech.
Okay.
And then see if it comes up in her voice in your head.
All
right. So we got two topics today. The first topic is going to be something we talked about in the last episode. Talking about point of views in books and what's our favorite kind of point of view. Is it first person? Is it third person? Is it multiple point of views? And what are the pros and cons of each?
Yeah.
So, do you want to go first?
I don't know. How do we want to structure this, right? We could either do here are books we've liked or disliked that had this type of view, or we can do just general feel.
I mean, I'll start with general feel. I tend to enjoy books that are first person or third person, more than I would from a book that has multiple point of views. Like,
well, multiple point of views would still be first person.
Okay, well then single point of view.
Okay.
I like the narrator being one person.
Okay.
Because it's easier to keep track of the story. Sometimes that point of view is used to keep information away from the reader.
Mm-hmm.
That you're finding out this everything as the character is finding out everything.
Yep.
So it's really good for like suspense novels and mystery novels, and like crime dramas because let's say you're reading a detective book. The detective only knows as much as you know. He's unraveling the mystery at the same time you are. So I feel like that kind of perspective is good. Not recently, but I read a book called The Breach. It was a fantasy fantasy Cold War mystery drama. It had a lot of stuff going on. And it was a single point of, it was a single point of view. It was from the point of view of like a CIA spy who was finding out all these things about, I won't go too much into the book, but the Berlin Wall was made out of magic instead of real wall. And there was something happening to it, and he had to figure out what was going on. And he met this other character who was like a female wizard, a female wizard who worked for the United States government and was also like investigating the same thing. It's an interesting book. But I like that perspective because I really don't want to know like 10 characters' point of views on the same thing that's happening. Like, I feels like sometimes it slows the story down.
Okay. How do you feel about 10 characters' views? I mean, in terms of theory, most likely it's 2 main characters' points of views in different books, because that's become super popular recently. Like, 50 Shades of Grey is the easiest one to come up with a example of. 50 Shades of Grey is written from the female lead's perspective. The entirety of the series is written from her perspective. So it was so popular and it became such a thing that the author actually wrote all 3 books from the male lead's perspective. So you could see literally both of them, but it's 2 different storylines entirely.
I wouldn't be opposed to that. As the thing that I don't like, and the thing that I'm reading through in 5 Broken Blades is that you get a chapter with a character's perspective, and then a chapter with another character's perspective, and then it has like 5 or 6 perspectives that it's following. And sometimes if, like me, you're not reading the book on a constant basis, like I read a couple of chapters and then I don't read anything for like a day or 2. It's hard to pick up on the story again because I don't remember exactly what's going on with which character.
You might need a book journal.
I might need a book journal.
See, I really kind of enjoy the multiple perspectives. However, they all kind of need to be written at the same pace. So, my punishment books.
Yeah.
My book 6 and 7 out of Throne of Glass. The characters' perspectives in Tower of Dawn are much slower paced. There's not as much happening, and it becomes much more difficult to get through those chapters. And the same thing happened with Game of Thrones. I think it's going to happen anytime you have a multiple character perspective book, because the same thing's going to happen in Game of Thrones. There's certain characters that are just less interesting to you, and the ones that are less interesting to me might not be less interesting to you.
Right.
But you're going to have ones that are less interesting than others, and those are going to be the chapters that you don't want to really read.
Right.
You have to for the story purpose. They're there for a reason, but it becomes a less fun book to read and more of a chore when you get to those, especially if they're longer chapters, like in my instance where the boring characters are really comprised in one book of 800 pages all by themselves, and you really don't want to read those 800 pages.
Yeah, it would be weird, like, if, let's say, Harry Potter was written from multiple perspectives.
Yeah.
Because, like, who really wants to know about Ron's perspective?
Now that I think about it, too, though, I wonder if that's a first or third person book. I haven't read that since I was in middle school.
I think it's probably a third person book, because it talks about, like, Harry in the third person. It says Harry this and Harry that. It doesn't say I this and I that.
Have you read Harry Potter?
I read the first book, yeah.
And you remember? When did you read it?
When did it come out?
Yeah, exactly. I read the first 4
It was assigned reading in my class one year.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I don't remember what perspective it was written in. I have a hard time remembering kind of how the books are. I remember obviously if it's multiple perspective or single perspective, but I have a hard time remembering, like, it doesn't resonate with me as much, third versus first perspective on a single character point of view. Although I would say when I think back on a book, I don't recall whether it was written in third or first perspective. Obviously, as I'm reading it, it's obvious, but after the fact, I don't remember what it was written as.
Okay.
However, if I think about what my gut says I find more interesting, I think I find first perspective more interesting. If I recall, my guess is that third person perspective stories are less enticing to me and less of a drive to kind of continue reading. Like when I get into a book that I enjoy, I can't put it down. I can't stop thinking about it, and I don't think third person perspectives have that same reaction for me most of the time. They can. Some of the books in Outlander are written from third perspective. I know that much.
Your beloved Nicholas Sparks books.
Yeah.
What perspective are they written in? Are they all written in the same perspective?
They're not. Some books have multiple person point of views. Some books have chapters that switch between characters. But I'm thinking of the single point of view storylines. I think most of them are third person, actually. Just thinking back to what the storylines are, they probably don't make as much sense in first person.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's probably a few that are first person, but they're definitely not all.
Right. I'm trying to think back. There are books that I've read that are written in like third person perspective, but they like every chapter follows a different character, so it's not not
a point of view thing because it's not first person, but
right.
You're getting different characters in each chapter.
Yeah, because the story is split between a couple of different characters. Like I read some of the books in like the Magic the Gathering series, and it has to follow like 2 or 3 different characters for you to get like the whole plot.
Mm-hmm.
There's like usually a villain character that it follows and a hero character, and probably a secondary hero character.
Well, I think you have that flexibility when it's third person to have it that way. Now that I recall it, I mean, Harry Potter is probably written in that manner. Some of the books, at least, are probably written in that manner.
Yeah.
Since Harry's not in I mean, let's think about it, right? If it's a first person perspective, that character has to be in every scene, or they don't know that happened.
Right.
So if I think in that manner, there's no way Harry Potter is a first perspective.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the big question is, do you ever get Harry's inner monologue? Do you ever get what Harry's thinking? Because then it's first person.
Good point. I don't know. Do you? I didn't read past book 5, so I don't know what happens in.
I don't remember.
6 or 7. Are there 7 books? Or
I'm
8
pretty
books?
sure.
7
I'm pretty sure you don't get an inner monologue from Harry.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
So it's got to be third.
It's got to be. If you're out there listening and you know better, let us know.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, Demon Copperfield that I'm reading now, that's a first person perspective. It's very much told from the child's point of view of this is my life.
Right. I'm trying to think of other books that I read that were like multiple perspectives. I did read some of the first Game of Thrones. 5 Broken Blades is that.
Now, Game of Thrones, the multiple perspective, and I think this happens when you have a very good multiple perspective book, a well-written one, is the multiple perspectives got me through Game of Thrones quicker.
Okay.
Because I'd be so invested in one of the characters' storylines that I'd blow through the next 5 chapters to get back to it.
Right.
Like, it would leave off on a character at a cliffhanger. I mean, much like the actual shows did. So you leave Daenerys on a cliffhanger and you go, okay, well, the next 3 chapters are, I don't know, Sansa, Arya, and Jon Snow. Well, so all I have to do is read 3 chapters and then I can figure out what happens to Daenerys. I'm going. Let's go.
Right.
I'll stay up another hour. Let's go. But on the opposite side, if it's not written, if you're not as invested in the characters, or you're not feeling as if it's as cohesive, or too many of them are slow paced on you and you don't like slow paced books, the opposite could happen. And that's kind of what happens with me on Throne of Glass. And I hit the Tower of Dawn chapters, and instead of powering through them to get back to the chapters I want to read, I just like, I'll stop now.
So I mean, what's your favorite then? Do you like the multiple person? Do you like third person?
I really enjoy, it depends on the storyline, because multiple person doesn't work, I think, for certain genres.
Yeah.
I think multiple person, you're right, does not really work for a suspense or a thriller if you truly want it to be a thriller, unless, you're not following someone who gives away the...
Right.
If you're doing a murder whodunit, like a murder mystery, you might be able to do that, multiple perspectives without giving anything away. But I think my preference is point of views. I do like to know kind of what's happening to everybody, because in regular life you have only one point of view, and it's kind of eye-opening to see other people's perspectives on things. So as a reader, you might interpret something happening in one way, and then you read the alternative lead in that maybe scene, their point of view, and you're like, oh, that's what you were doing. That gives me a different opinion of you, or I don't think you're as good anymore, or bad for that matter. And I like that. The caveat I would put is that it's very hard to do it right. And so if it's done well, I love it. But I think too much of the time it's not done well, and it takes away from the story.
Okay.
I think first person perspective is consistently good.
Okay.
So I'm never going to say, oh, this shouldn't have been first person perspective, right? I might say in a first person perspective book, you know what, I'd really like to see what it was from this other person's perspective. And in that case, sometimes, like I said, with 50 Shades, the publisher will release that, or even just a snippet, a chapter. There's a book, Quicksilver, I think, was being done that way. Quicksilver is book 1 of a, I don't know how many series book thing, because book 2 hasn't come out yet. So I don't know how long it's going to go. But the author had a lot of pressure to release more information about it, and they did start releasing on their website, oh, here's another chapter, but from this person's perspective, or like, they have that flexibility. And I think that gives a lot of opportunity to an author to not make as robust of a first book, first see if people are interested in it.
Right.
And you don't end up with a George R.R. Martin book that's 700 pages. Like, maybe you just give me a book that's 300 pages that has a really great storyline, and then you see if your readers are actually interested in learning more about the world and the characters and everything, and go from there.
Right. I would say that, once again, I don't prefer the multiple perspective books. I think I prefer either first or third. I don't really care which it is, first or third. Like, we were talking earlier about, like, you never read a biography.
Yeah.
And, like, the difference between autobiography and biography is autobiography is in first person.
Yeah.
Because it's the author who is the person they're talking about. So you get all their insight and their feelings, and, like, in the Becky Lynch book, you get the feel about how she felt about what she was doing when she was doing it. And, like, contrast that to the Hamilton biography, not written by Alexander Hamilton, but Ron Chernow. And you get Ron Chernow's perspective of Hamilton and all the, let's call it, cast of characters, all of his family and friends, and, like, but you don't get how Hamilton felt.
Right.
You get about how someone else felt about Hamilton's life.
Well, you're not really getting a feeling, though, in a biography, are you? Isn't it more of just a historical summary of here's how this went down?
It really depends on who's writing it.
I see.
Like, the Hamilton biography, yeah, it's basically like a historical summary of what went down, but it's also about, like, Hamilton as a person and how others felt about him.
Okay.
So, it's not 100%. There's always an angle for the author. There's always a place for them to write from. Whether it depends on who they're talking about. Like if they're talking about like an important figure in comedy, the book's gonna lean towards being funny.
I would actually prefer a sad story. No, I wouldn't. There's too many comedians who.
Yeah, there's too many comedians with sad stories.
Yeah, no, never mind.
But like,
you know what I mean, like a super contrast to what.
Yeah.
Like a biography about a historian that's pure satire. That would be hilarious.
But yeah, I guess that's my feelings on it. Is that when I started reading Five Broken Blades, my first thought when I came up on chapter 2 and it was a completely different character, I was like, oh, it's one of these books, okay. So you know.
Now, how do you feel? Have you ever read a book that has multiple perspectives but also multiple timelines?
I think that would blow my mind.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Too much for you?
It might be. Multiple timelines.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
All right, so I read that book, Society of Lies.
Okay.
And it's about a girl who's murdered. Well, she dies in college. It's unknown whether it's a murder or not. And her sister is trying to figure out what happened to her. And her sister, it's at an Ivy League school, and there's those prestigious clubs and frats that you join, but it's not like a Greek fraternity, right? It's a social fraternity. Yeah. They both happen to be a part of the same one, but 11 years apart. And some of the similar blackmail and nefarious things were happening to the older sister when she was going through it, that the younger sister also endured before she died. And so the chapters flip back and forth between the now deceased younger sister and the current timeline where older sister's trying to figure it out, what happened, but also back to the older sister's time in college from 11 years ago.
Okay.
So you have 3 different timelines, 2 different perspectives, one from each sister. And the one that starts with the sister who passed away, each chapter starts 10 months before death, 9 months before death, 8 months before death, and you kind of lead up to actual death as you're uncovering what's happened in her life. And the older sister's perspectives are either current day or the date 11 years ago where she went through something. And it was a very interesting way of reading. It's probably the only one I can think of easily off the top of my head, and it's only because I read it recently, that has both timeline and character perspectives.
Okay. That might be a lot. That might be a lot. I sometimes have problems following TV shows that are like that. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know.
At least in TV shows, like they put a color filter over it, so you kind of know, ooh, this is a flashback or something like that. That would be a really interesting way to print the book, is like have a tint on the pages.
Yeah, or have like
a border or something.
Or have like a slightly different color to the type.
Right, or even just a font size, something that like helped you, and that might actually be a really cool idea. I don't have a problem separating chapter over chapter and timelines and characters and things like that. I don't mind that. I mean, I didn't love the book, but that wasn't the reason. That was okay. However, most of the people in the book club who read the book did have a real problem with that. It kept drawing them out of the story, and it was a much harder story to follow for them.
I think if the book is purposefully leading you to not know that there are 2 different timelines, like if the book is leaving out that these are 2 different timelines until a certain point, it could be confusing.
Oh, I read a book like that.
Kind of like there's movies that they're like, oh, we're not telling you this, but this is like 2 different people at 2 different times doing this thing. And then at some point in the middle, they're like, oh yeah, so this is totally a different timeline, guys.
Yeah, I've read books like that. I forget which ones.
But I feel like if the book in the beginning told you, hey, this is one person in one time, and this is a different person in a different time, then it would be better.
Yeah, that's what Society of Lies did. It was, here's the name, here's the time you're in, then start the chapter. Like, chapter 1, Maya, November 2010. And it was always headed up like that.
Yeah. I think I could deal with that. Mm-hmm. But if the book was purposefully deceiving about the time, then obviously there's a reason for it, but it draws you out a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then you got to figure what is going on.
Yeah, I get that.
Shall we move on to
segue? Yeah, we could segue.
Okay.
What's the end verdict? Do we say our verdicts?
I said that I don't prefer the multiple perspectives.
But do you prefer third or first?
I prefer first because I like knowing the character's inner monologue.
Okay. And I don't know that I have a preference in terms of how I read the story, but I think historically I've enjoyed more stories from a first person's perspective first person's perspective either way, either multiple characters or single character. I think I enjoy them more, but I don't think it's necessarily because of that style. I think it's just those storylines, those plots I've enjoyed more that were written that way. I don't know. It doesn't draw me out to read a third person, but
right.
I'm open to all books, except for biographies.
Speaking of all books, so I'm going to put this in the front so that people know no one paid us to say any of this.
We're just big nerds.
I wish they would. Amanda found this app. Storygraph.
And it's just what it says. It's graphs about your stories. And as the statistician Tim is, and the accountant I am, numbers and graphs really do it for us.
Yeah, that's true. So this is one of those bookshelf apps, but it also has like statistics on the books that you read
based on a timeline that you want, so you can it's pretty awesome.
And it also gives you book recommendations based on the books that you read.
Yeah, AI, based on how you've reviewed them, AI will tell you what you might want to read next. You can obviously friend people, just like on Goodreads and things like that. But really, the stats it spits out are pretty freaking awesome. And you can do it for any given month or for the whole year. And it'll give you these cool pie charts about what moods have been in the books that you've read. How fast, slow, or medium they go, page numbers, fiction versus nonfiction, genres, whether you're reading more print or digital, and it gives you like graphs on, line graphs on pages read per month and per year. It's super fun. It's very data driven.
Yeah.
And I love looking at summary graphs, and it actually is tracking the number of pages I read in a year, not just a book, which I think is a better metric. Because I feel there's so many people who are trying to hit, 300 books in a year, or not me. I'm not that person, but I know people who do that. Actually, I met someone in my book group who, I think her goal was 700 books this year. She's absolutely insane. And has a job, has a full-time job, but whatever. So I think people who are trying to hit that number, all great and fine and dandy, and that's awesome that you get to touch so many different stories and authors. But if you're reading, at some point, you're probably just reading books that are 100 pages, 50 pages, short stories here and there, just to hit your number. Whereas I haven't read that many books this year, but my page count right now is 17,000 pages, and that just feels really rewarding. That's a lot of pages. And I take off 3 months because I'm a tax accountant. I don't really read during tax season.
So one of the other cool things about this app is that you can friend people and follow them, and it will give you a summary of how they read. So for Amanda, it says mainly reads fiction books that are emotional, adventurous, and dark. Typically chooses medium-paced books that are 300 to 499 pages long. And you recently read The Glass Girl, Say You'll Be Mine, Angela's Ashes, and Hidden Pictures. And it shows what books you've reviewed and books you own and your to-read pile.
Yeah. My to-read pile is quite large.
What does it say about me?
Let me find you. Hold on. Let me go back to you. By the way, if you choose, first of all, Storygraph, you don't have to pay anything to be a part of. You can join it for free. They have a paid option also, but Tim and I don't pay for that. So yeah, I don't know what you get out of it. I'm sure it's more. I think you get more graphs and more stat options, but you certainly can get it without paying for it first, which is kind of nice. So Tim's says mainly reads nonfiction books, shocking, that are informative, adventurous, and funny. typically chooses slow-paced books that are 300 to 499 pages long. He's recently read entirely 4 books that have no fiction value to them at all. So, like, one of them, I mean, I just want to roll my eyes at. He writes that he read recently Robert's Rules of Order, which I don't think you actually read recently. I think you just didn't change your dates.
I read it a few years. Yeah, I forgot to change the date on that.
Yeah.
That
so
was for school.
When you put in, if you want to, first of all, you can import all your stuff from Goodreads, which is super awesome. Although you do probably want a desktop for it because you have to export to Excel and upload it, whatever. But you can put in historical data and mark the days that you've read them too, so that it puts it in the right stats for you. So I had a different app I was using called Bookworm to kind of, really not to review any books, just to kind of keep track of what I was reading, because I wasn't a huge fan of Goodreads. And so I was able to go through my Bookworm app and say, okay, I started this book on this date, ended it on this date, and now it's in that correct spot of my year, which I find really awesome.
Right.
So I don't know how valid any of Tim's are, really, but it's Robert's Rules of Order. Electoral Politics is not enough.
I did actually just read that.
Okay. One of the Joshua Weissman cookbooks.
I read pretty recently.
But like, you don't read a cookbook cover to cover. I disagree with having that as a read book, but whatever. And then Medallion Status by John Hodgman.
Oh, I mean, that wasn't too recent, but it was within the last year.
I think you only have 1 5-star read. Is that accurate?
I haven't reviewed many books yet.
Okay.
I only reviewed,
the only 5-star read you have is your number 1 book from our last podcast, which was 1984, for those of you who haven't listened to that one.
So I'll go into some of the stuff that I get on my graph. So, my fiction versus nonfiction read is 38% or 32% fiction and 68% nonfiction. My top 3 genres are politics, history, and fantasy. So that's what's going on there. And it says I've read 65 books.
Yeah, but you have your dates wrong.
I have my dates
There's
wrong.
no way you read 65 this year.
Dates wrong. And my moods, it has a moods pie chart. My top 3 moods are informative, adventurous, and reflective.
Yeah, which it tells you that in that summary.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 that were top for you.
What do you got going for your top?
So my graphs, let's do graphs that you didn't talk about.
Okay.
So what did you talk about? Moods and fiction, nonfiction.
And the genre.
Okay. So I have a graph for page numbers. So 69% of the books that I read this year had between 300 and 499 pages. 21% were over 500 pages. And 10% were under 300. 77% of the books I read are medium paced. And I actually have a most read authors graph.
I have one of those too, but I think the most read author I have is it's an anime author, so I don't really count that one.
My most read author, I've read 10 books by this author this year.
Oh, I see.
So that's Sarah J. Maas, because I'm in my Maas era.
Your Maas era.
My Maas era. I think that's a thing. So, I mean, that's because Court of Thorns and Roses is 5 books. And The Throne of Glass is Sarah J. Maas, and that's another 8 books. And I'm on 6 and 7. So, and then Laura Thalassa, I read 5 books from this year. Sabaa Tahir, I read 4. But that's because I enjoy series, and you don't. So
yeah, my top authors are Tidy Kubo, who writes Bleach. Alton Brown. I have 5 Alton Brown cookbooks.
Yes, but once again, you don't read a cookbook cover to cover, so I don't know that it's ever actually read.
I mean, I do read a lot of the cookbooks. There's a lot of stuff in there.
That's
There's
like reading the
details.
Dictionary.
Anyway, and then number 3 is a tie between Stephen Colbert, Robert J. King, who wrote the Wheel of Time series, and Robert Putnam.
Do you have the do you have the graph of number of books and pages?
Yes.
For the year?
Yes.
Okay, what's your highest month?
My highest month? Mine's by year, not month.
Oh. Okay. Well, I only put in stuff from this year, so.
Yeah, I have. Mine goes all the way back to 2006.
Okay.
But the most books read in a year I have is, I think 2018, and it's 7.
Okay. Well, I'm up to 39 books for this year.
Well,
so.
yeah. You read books like you're drinking water.
No, I think I read books more than I drink water. I don't drink the appropriate amount of water. But I have, like, for July, I read, I don't know, it looks like about 6 or 7 books. And it was maybe about 2,700 pages.
Some of us were busy in July.
Not you.
Yeah, I was very busy.
Nah, not you. Anyways, everyone, highly recommend Storygraph. Feel free to follow or friend me. I am TBR Hammer.
And if you want to follow or friend me, I believe that I am Vic Striker.
With a Y in Striker.
With a Y, all one word.
Yep.
Before we finish the section, how many books are you currently reading?
Oh, you know what? I've gotten that down.
You've gotten that down?
I've gotten that down because I finished up some of those ones that were long-standing ones.
Oh, okay.
So I'm only on 4 currently reading.
I'm 16.
Yeah, I'm on 4. I'm still on. So I think I talked about Joan last time we podcasted, that I was in the middle of that one. So I am still reading that. I tried to get into it during my book retreat, but it wasn't. It was a little bit too slow-paced for me for that day, so I passed on it. I still got my 2 punishment books, my Throne of Glass, book 6 and 7, and then Demon Copperhead. That's all I'm reading right now. Although I'm not counting the ones that are on my bookshelf with bookmarks in them because they're all so old that I would restart them.
I see. So I'm not going to go through all 16 books. I'll just list through a couple of them. Obviously, the Becky Lynch book, and 5 Broken Blades. I'm also currently reading, let's see. I did start The Blade Itself book, but I'm only on the first chapter. I'm still reading How Democracies Die. I'm almost through that book. Jeez, there's just so many. I'm reading a few comedy books because I'm a stand-up. And let's see. A good recommendation for anyone who likes politics is a book called The Red and the Blue by Steve Kornacki. It's about 90s era tribal politics, and it's good. It's a good book. So, we're gonna do something new before we go on to what we're excited about to read next. Amanda's gonna give us a book review.
You know what's funny? You actually mentioned the book that I'm gonna review when you were going through my story graph as a book I recently finished.
Okay.
The Glass Girl. Glass Girl is actually a book that I got at my reading retreat. It's an ARC book, which I didn't even know what that meant at the time. But it means advanced reader copy. So it's an unpublished book right now. It comes out on, I think, November 19th. But it's called The Glass Girl by Kathleen Glasgow, who you may know about. She's written a bunch of really popular books. It's a young adult fiction. It's very much about addiction and kind of healing through that and growth. And it's a first-person perspective book. And it's such a raw... it's written so awly that it almost is like reading someone's diary, although it's clearly not a diary. It is all just a first-person perspective, but it's very much what you would expect someone to kind of write in their diary. Anyways, I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was really phenomenal. I think as somebody who has never dealt with addiction and trying to overcome that, my perspective is it felt like it was a really accurate portrayal of kind of the inner turmoil that someone goes through when they're struggling with addiction and the cravings and thought processes behind when you're going to get your next fix. And I'm sure it's a lot of triggers for people, and so it's not a book for everyone, but I do know people who are or were addicts, and I think it helped give me a little bit more of a kind of a softer perspective on what they deal with on a regular basis.
Okay. So 5 stars?
5 stars. I gave it 5 stars, and my book journal has 3 different 5-star options. So
okay.
The overall 5 stars, I enjoyed it, was 5 stars. Ease of reading was 4 stars, and I don't remember why I put that. Maybe because I think it's just because it was a really heavy, like it's obviously a very heavy
the subject matter.
Topic. Yeah. Because it's a teenager. It's a kid. She's 15.
Yeah.
She's 15, and she's dealing with being an alcoholic.
Okay.
And it's broken into multiple parts, which I thought was cool too. It was like the part where she became the addict, the part where she's getting that figured out, and the part where she's kind of growing from it. And yeah, it was truly a first person's perspective. Like when you talk about someone getting blackout drunk, it was written as if she had no recollection. It was blackout drunk. She was being told what happened from perspective of people who were there, who remembered it. it was really interesting.
Well, it kind of ties in all the themes that we were talking about.
Yeah. Kind of.
All right. So, cool. So you said November 19th, right? You think?
I believe it's November 19th. The book is upstairs on my finished bookshelf, so I don't have it with me handy, but
yeah,
I think it's the 19th, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, so we're recording this before the book comes out, so if you like books that are of that subject matter and
it's it's a coming of age, coming of age, but dark and struggling with it.
Yeah, check it out.
So triggers related to the book, in case you need to know that, is divorce, alcoholism, drug abuse, suicide, all the turmoil that you might go through as an addict or because of puberty.
All right, let's wrap it up and talk about what we're excited to read next.
Yeah, what are you excited to read next when you finish 5 Broken Blades?
All the 16, 15 other books that I have to read.
No, but those are currently reading.
Oh, jeez.
Do you have a new book you want to read?
Do I have a new
or
book?
Is there one maybe of your 16 that you're really, now that you remember you're actually reading it, that you're actually excited to finish?
So I am really excited to get back into, what was the book? So I am really excited to start reading, or continue reading the Last Kingdom books, because I got pretty far before I stopped reading it and totally forgot about it. Mm-hmm. And I like the television series, mm-hmm. and so far the television series and the book are kind of different.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So I think the television series sort of condenses what happens in the book and mm-hmm. changes the timeline of it. Mm-hmm. So the book is giving like a longer view of the main character.
I mean, that's standard, right? You just can't put typically everything in a book into even a show that has more time. It's very difficult to put everything in there. It's typically cut into a different timeline.
Yeah.
But does it feel like a different story?
No, it just feels like it doesn't feel like a different story. Stuff happens in a different order, but I think it's you get a better view of the other characters too. You get like more on the side characters than you would in the television show. Okay,
is it a first person or is it then third?
It is first person. It is first person. So like it's the main character's name is Uhtred, son of Uhtred.
No, Uhtred Ragnarsson.
Uhtred Ragnarsson. It's his first person perspective, so you're getting everything.
Okay. It's just he has more interaction with some of the other characters.
It goes into depth a little bit more with some of the characters.
All right. That's neat.
And I also have the second book in the series too, so that's kind of why I'm excited. I want to get to the second book.
How many books are there?
I don't know. Okay. I think it's somewhere around the neighborhood of 12.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that should be nice. Although you don't really like reading series, so I'm going to be interested to see if you actually make it through all 12.
And what about you?
I am going to read next Salt to the Sea by Ruta Sepetys. I honestly have no idea how to say her name. And I apologize to Ruta for that. But it's a historical fiction novel, and every once in a while I like to kind of mix those in. But it is about essentially immigrating in 1945. The back of the book is Winter 1945, 4 refugees, 4 secrets, each one born of a different homeland, each one hunted and haunted by tragedy, lies, war. As thousands desperately flock to the coast in the midst of a Soviet advance, 4 paths converge, vying for passage aboard the Wilhelm Gustloff, a ship that promises safety and freedom, but not all promises can be kept. So I don't know, I'm very intrigued by it. It feels like a historical fiction that also has some mystery and intrigue, and I'm very curious about it. But it is written from multiple perspectives since it's following 4 different characters. So we'll get back into that. What I do find funny as I flip through this, and you'll see, some of the chapters are literally a page.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I kind of enjoy that. I enjoy short chapter books because I read them much quicker.
Okay.
Long I don't like stopping and starting in the middle of chapters. If I'm going to sit down and I read a full chapter. And if I'm going to stop, I stop at a full chapter. So when it's a small chapter, I'm like, well, I could read one more page. And that goes on for 3 hours and I'm done with the book. Whereas, if it's a longer chapter, it's going to take me maybe 20 minutes to get through this chapter because it's a 50-page chapter or 40-page chapter, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what if I don't want to read for the next 20 minutes? And so I don't start it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited for it. I'm taking it on our trip, so.
Okay. One last thing before we go. We are starting a Kickstarter soon for the pop-up bookstore, the Book Revolution bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
So keep an eye out for that in Kickstarter. Just put in the search bar The Book Revolution. It should be up soon. And please be a contributor, be a backer. We have lots of fun prizes, including exclusive merch. And if you want to give us the most amount of money, you can name a bookshelf in the store. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll see you next time on the Book Revolution podcast.
Bye.